This morning, you probably did something your ancestors couldn't have imagined. You turned a handle, and clean water appeared. Hot if you wanted it. Then you probably brushed your teeth with mint-flavored toothpaste, stepped into a warm shower, washed with soap and shampoo, put on clean clothes, applied deodorant, and maybe still felt like you needed a cup of coffee before becoming a real person. Now imagine losing every single one of those comforts. No shower, no toothpaste, no shampoo, no deodorant, no washing machine, no fresh laundry, no bathroom mirror, no minty confidence. Just you, the weather, fire, smoke, skin, hair, animal hides, dirt, food, and whatever water you could find. That was everyday life for countless generations of humans. So, did ancient humans smell bad? By modern standards, the answer is probably yes. But that answer barely scratches the surface. The real question isn't whether they smelled. It's how they managed to stay healthy enough to survive without modern hygiene. And the truth is far more fascinating than simply saying they were dirty. Ancient humans weren't helpless. And they certainly weren't primitive in the way we often imagine. They weren't wandering through history covered in mud with no understanding of cleanliness. They had solutions. They simply didn't have our solutions. Let's start with the mouth. At this very moment, your mouth contains hundreds of different species of bacteria. Brushing your teeth doesn't eliminate them. It keeps them under control. Toothpaste isn't a magic cure. It's simply a way of managing a microscopic population. Ancient humans had no toothbrushes, no toothpaste, no floss, no mouthwash, and certainly no electric toothbrush, reminding them they had only brushed for 30 seconds. Yet when archaeologists examine ancient teeth, the story turns out to be far more complicated than most people expect. One of the biggest changes in human dental health didn't happen because people forgot to clean their teeth. It happened when their diet changed. Before agriculture, many hunter-gatherers ate an incredibly varied menu consisting of meat, roots, nuts, berries, seeds, leaves, and whatever else the environment provided. Then farming transformed everything. Grain became a major food source. Soft carbohydrates became more common. Foods began sticking to teeth more easily, feeding the bacteria responsible for tooth decay. Ironically, the better humans became at baking bread, the better they also became at developing cavities. But ancient people weren't doing nothing. Long before modern toothbrushes existed, many communities cleaned their teeth using chewing sticks. At first glance, that might sound primitive. But if you think about it, a toothbrush is essentially just a stick with bristles attached to one end. A properly prepared chewing stick could scrape away food, clean between teeth, and even release natural compounds from certain plants. Some traditional chewing sticks, including miswak, have been scientifically studied and shown to reduce plaque surprisingly well. Sometimes the oldest technology survives for thousands of years because it actually works. Now let's move to the question almost everyone clicked for. Body odor. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Sweat itself isn't usually what smells. Fresh sweat is mostly water and salt. The odor comes later, when bacteria living on your skin begin breaking down compounds in that sweat. In other words, ancient body odor wasn't simply the result of sweating. It was shaped by bacteria, skin, clothing, food, weather, movement, smoke, and time. Someone who spent the entire day walking, carrying tools, gathering food, sitting beside a fire, sleeping on animal hides, and wearing the same clothing for days would almost certainly have smelled stronger than the average person today. But stronger doesn't automatically mean dirtier. This is where modern assumptions often mislead us. We tend to imagine ancient humans as filthy simply because they lacked our products. But shampoo, deodorant, and scented soap are inventions, not measures of intelligence. Our ancestors didn't need advertisements to understand that some things were clean while others were dangerous. Rot smelled wrong, stagnant water smelled wrong, waste smelled wrong. A wound that suddenly developed a foul odor could mean serious trouble. A dead animal that smelled strange could become deadly to eat. In a world without hospitals, expiration dates, laboratory tests, or warning labels, your nose wasn't just another sense. It was one of your most important survival tools. A single smell could answer questions that determined whether you lived or died. Is this food still safe? Can we drink this water? Is someone nearby sick? Is there a predator, a carcass, or something dangerous close to camp? Smell wasn't merely unpleasant, it carried information. Ironically, one of the strongest smells surrounding ancient humans may not have been sweat at all. It was smoke. For our ancestors, fire wasn't an occasional camping activity. It provided warmth during cold nights, protection from predators, light after sunset, cooked food, and a place where families gathered together. Living beside a fire every day meant smoke settled onto everything. It clung to hair, skin, clothing, bedding, tools, shelters, and animal hides. To us, that smell might seem overpowering. To them, it probably meant something completely different. Smoke meant warmth, safety, cooked food, family, a place where darkness didn't completely take over. One of the oldest human scents may not have been perfume. It may have been campfire, but smoke wasn't the only thing that trapped odor. Clothing changed the story completely. Once humans began wearing clothes regularly, smells had somewhere to stay. Animal hides protected the body from wind and freezing temperatures, but after days of walking, sweating, sleeping beside fires, carrying supplies, and living outdoors, those same garments absorbed everything. They became part of a person's scent. Surprisingly, some of the strongest evidence for early clothing doesn't come from preserved fabric at all. It comes from lice. Head lice live in hair. Body lice are different. They spend most of their lives inside clothing, hiding in seams and laying their eggs in fabric. That seemingly unpleasant detail gives scientists an unexpected clue about human history. Body lice could only evolve after humans began wearing clothes often enough for the parasites to survive there. Genetic studies suggest body lice split from head lice tens of thousands of years ago, possibly even earlier. While that doesn't tell us exactly when the first shirt or cloak appeared, it does reveal something remarkable. Clothing became such a permanent part of human life that an entirely new parasite adapted to live inside it. In a strange way, humanity's first wardrobe also created its first tenants. Ancient people also paid far more attention to where they slept than we often imagine. Archaeologists working at sites such as Sibidu Cave in South Africa have uncovered evidence of carefully prepared plant bedding dating back roughly 77,000 years. Other sites, including Border Cave, reveal layers of grasses mixed with ash. That combination wasn't accidental. Fine ash made it harder for crawling insects to move through sleeping areas, while certain aromatic plants may have helped discourage pests. These weren't comfortable mattresses by modern standards, but they reveal thoughtful planning. People deliberately selected materials, reused fire byproducts, and organized sleeping spaces to reduce discomfort and lower the risk of parasites. This highlights an important difference between ancient and modern hygiene. Today, cleanliness is often associated with smelling fresh. For ancient humans, cleanliness was far more practical. It meant avoiding insects, keeping waste away from living areas, choosing safer water, reducing disease, and creating environments where families could survive another day. It wasn't about smelling pleasant, it was about staying alive. Hair tells a similar story. Ancient humans didn't have shampoo, but that doesn't mean they ignored their hair. Hair could be combed, braided, tied back, trimmed, rinsed, cleaned by hand, and carefully checked for parasites. Grooming wasn't a luxury, it was part of everyday life. One remarkable discovery comes from the ancient city of Lachish, where archaeologists uncovered a small ivory comb dating back roughly 3,700 years. Engraved onto it is a simple request asking for lice to be removed from both hair and beard. It's an incredible reminder that some human problems have barely changed. One of humanity's earliest written messages was essentially asking someone to get bugs out of their hair. But grooming served a much larger purpose than appearance. Among many primates today, Grooming strengthens social bonds. It builds trust, cooperation, and close relationships. Early humans likely behaved in much the same way, checking one another's hair, cleaning wounds, removing parasites, and inspecting the skin weren't simply acts of hygiene. They were acts of community. Modern hygiene is usually private. We step into a bathroom, close the door, and take care of ourselves alone. For much of human history, staying healthy was often something people did together. Water followed the same pattern. Ancient humans weren't afraid of water. They depended on it. They settled near rivers when possible, drank from them, crossed them, fished in them, and washed in them. But there was never a single routine that applied everywhere. Life beside a tropical river was completely different from life on a frozen steppe. A desert demanded different habits than a forest. A small mobile camp functioned differently from a permanent settlement. Climate, geography, season, and available resources shaped how often people washed and where they could do it safely. So we shouldn't imagine every ancient human enjoying a relaxing daily bath, but we also shouldn't imagine them avoiding water altogether. No bathroom didn't mean no washing. It meant washing depended on common sense, local conditions, and survival. Soap is another perfect example of how modern assumptions can mislead us. Soap itself is ancient, but humanity is far older. Soap-like substances appeared in ancient Mesopotamia thousands of years ago, yet humans had already spent hundreds of thousands of years hunting, gathering, raising families, healing wounds, and surviving without anything resembling a modern bar of soap. So how did they stay clean? They relied on the environment around them. Sand could scrub away dirt. Ash helped remove grease. Clay absorbed oils from the skin. Water carried away mud and debris. Sunlight dried damp materials. Smoke discouraged some insects. Certain plants contained natural compounds that could clean, soothe, or repel pests. None of these worked exactly like modern soap. But they weren't nothing. That's the important point. Ancient humans weren't trying to recreate our hygiene products. They were solving the same problems with completely different tools, many of which proved surprisingly effective. Then we arrive at the question almost everyone wonders about but rarely asks aloud. How did they go to the bathroom? The simple answer is the same way every other wild animal does. They went outside. But the real answer is far more interesting. Human waste becomes dangerous when it stays too close to food, drinking water, or sleeping areas. You don't need microscopes or germ theory to notice that a campsite becomes less healthy when waste begins to accumulate nearby. Experience alone teaches that lesson quickly. Archaeologists have even been able to study traces of ancient human waste. At El Salt in Spain, researchers identified evidence connected to Neanderthals dating back roughly 50,000 years. Other studies suggest that many hunter-gatherer groups manage waste in surprisingly organized ways. Even if those methods differed from place to place, the details changed. The principle didn't. Where waste goes matters. Small mobile communities had one enormous advantage that later cities would lose. They had space. If a campsite became unpleasant, contaminated, or exhausted, people could simply move somewhere else. Dense settlements didn't have that luxury. Once thousands of people, animals, waste, and limited water supplies occupied the same location, sanitation became a completely different challenge. Long before soap became common, humanity's greatest hygiene tool may simply have been distance. So, did ancient humans smell bad? By modern standards, they probably did. They likely smelled of smoke, earth, sweat, animal hides, damp clothing, and the landscapes they lived in. Their scent reflected long walks, changing weather, campfires, hard work, and survival. But that doesn't mean they were dirty. To us, those smells might seem unpleasant because we've been raised in a world where cleanliness is associated with artificial fragrances. Soap, shampoo, deodorant, toothpaste, laundry detergent, fabric softener, and perfume have taught us that clean has a particular smell. Ancient people would have experienced that very differently. Imagine someone from 50,000 years ago standing in a modern supermarket. The overwhelming scent of perfumes, detergents, disinfectants, and deodorants might not smell clean at all. It might smell strange, unnatural, or even alarming. In many ways, we would probably smell just as unusual to them as they would to us. That's because cleanliness isn't defined only by biology. It's also shaped by culture. For most of human history, the natural smell of a human body wasn't something people constantly tried to erase. Smoke after sitting beside a fire, sweat after walking for miles, damp earth after rain, animal hides after weeks of use, and the scent of cooked food lingering on clothing were simply part of everyday life. Those odors weren't necessarily signs of neglect. They were reminders of work, family, shelter, and survival. The modern expectation that a healthy person should have almost no natural body odor is remarkably recent. So the answer isn't that ancient humans were as clean as we are today. They weren't. But it's equally wrong to imagine them as filthy people who knew nothing about hygiene. They understood water. They understood fire. They used plants, ash, sand, combs, and careful observation. They learned which bedding attracted fewer insects, which plants discouraged parasites, which water was safe to drink, and which wounds demanded immediate attention. Generation after generation, they built practical knowledge that helped them survive in environments far harsher than our own. Your ancestors didn't have modern hygiene products. They had experience, and in many cases, experience was enough. The next time you step into a hot shower or brush your teeth without giving it a second thought, remember that these routines are incredibly new in the story of our species. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans stayed alive using different methods, different tools, and a completely different understanding of what it meant to be clean. They weren't trying to smell like us. They were trying to survive. And considering that every person alive today descends from them, they must have been doing something right.